Well, entering the wind tunnel right now is an old friend, an old family that I've known all the way back to his granddad. It is Corey Lajoie driving for Spire Motorsports on the Cup Series in NASCAR. Corey, welcome to the wind tunnel. I know it's not the wind tunnel that you wish you had access to.
Yeah, yeah. We don't get much. This is about the only wind tunnel we're able to get with the smaller teams. Them big teams clog them things up quite often. But anytime I can get any sort of wind tunnel and get some data, anytime I can talk to Jack Root, I'm always hopping off.
Let's talk a little bit about the last couple of years for you. Made it into the Cup Series, was a privateer entry, and I like to use that term instead of saying, B-level cars. But
Yeah.
competing week in and week out, I don't think that the average fan can really appreciate the racing that's going on in your peer group during a 400 or a 500 miler. How intense is it?
Well, hell, a lot of the times the racing back between 20th and 30th is harder than the guys that are racing for the lead, because the further you get back, the more each and every spot's valuable, because a lot of us get paid per position or per on a ladder system. So, we're not making seven figures to drive like a lot of the guys are. So, you got to be a little more aggressive, but on the flip side, you got to take care of your stuff. But, there's a level of respect because we are all kind of doing it, the same way relatively. Guys like Michael McDowell, Alex Bowman did it for a little while before his shot at Hendrick Motorsports. Guys that can't. Matt DiBenedetto is another guy that have started in the privateer teams, if you will, and then gotten a shot in a factory team to show what they're capable of doing. So, we're having some fun at Spire. Some weekends are not quite as fun as others, but the last three races, not counting the All-Star Open, throw that exhibition race out, but we got 3 top 20s in a row, which for us is a damn good run. So hopefully we continue that here at Nashville this weekend.
I look at your career, and you did something that I thought was just absolutely totally outside of the box. So it wasn't unexpected from you, is when you handed Rick Hendrick a letter asking him to quite simply consider you. Now, I think you knew up front that was not going to come to fruition.
Yeah.
So what was behind writing and giving that letter to Rick?
Well, I feel like that handwritten notes, whether it's birthday card or a get well soon card, like all that stuff is such a lost art, because it's way more convenient and efficient to send a text message, but it's also not heartfelt, and I could politic and send emails and call Rick's guy and leave him a voicemail and say, hey, please call me back. I'd love to drive 48. But when I was talking to Jimmy halfway through the year, towards the end of the year last year, and I said, man, what could I do to differentiate myself a little bit? I realize it's going to be a competitive choice, right? Where with the teams I've driven for in my Cup career, I haven't really shown what I'm capable of doing behind the wheel, just because your handicap so much about what the horse you're sitting on is. But I feel like some of my strengths are off the racetrack with doing stuff in the media, doing stuff engaged with the fans, with the podcast and some other things, Sirius XM radio. And I feel like that's just because I'm a personal guy. That's the relationships is what kind of got me this far in my career. And I was like, hey, how about if I asked Jimmy, I said, what if I just wrote Rick a letter? He goes, man, he'd love it. He's, I don't know if that would be the difference between them hiring you to go in the 48, but it definitely ain't gonna hurt. Right. So, so I spent probably a month just going through 4 or 5 different drafts. My wife marking up my bad grammar and trying to figure out the angle of which I wanted just to write it. And, and you said it right. It was just a letter just to be considered. I didn't expect to be the leading guy in camp, and I haven't frankly done enough on the racetrack to earn that spot. But just to tell or show Rick that I feel like I am capable to do the job he would need to be in that 48 car, now the 5 car, and obviously, no question he made the right choice on who to put in it. But it actually worked out to NASCAR asked me to present Waddell Wilson's Hall of Fame acceptance for whatever reason. I guess I have to have some sort of current driver to do one of the 5 guys in the hall every year. So I figured, I was like, all right, Rick's gonna be there, right? He's got a blue jacket. So I tucked it in my suit jacket, and I hope I'd bump into him. And sure enough, obviously he was there, and I got the opportunity to kind of see him behind stage and say, hey, Rick, I've been, just take a look at this whenever you get a chance. And thanks for just giving me the 5 minutes to read it. He said, oh man, thank you. So then, on a couple days go by, and I didn't want it to be a PR stunt, right? I didn't want it to really get out. I don't really remember how it got out exactly, but obviously it started the story took some traction and started going, just because it is so out of the ordinary for somebody to do that. But I didn't do it to get a story on NBC Sports. I did it to tell Rick, the guy who owns the most successful NASCAR team in history, that I want to drive his race cars. So, who knows? And it's came not quite full circle, but it's turned around a lot, because currently we have Hendrick Motors in our Spire Motorsports Camaros. So, it's pretty cool just to have a little bit of you look under the hood and you see those Hendrick valve covers. Whether or not it might be the same package as the 9 or the 5, it's not, but it's still pretty cool to have Hendrick power plants under the hood for sure.
I'm glad you talked a little bit about Spire, because one of the things that I read was when you decided to go over there, it was an opportunity, and I think it is. It's a small team that under controlled growth is trying to impact NASCAR. In your mind, or in your estimation, how much further must they go before they exit the privateer garage and get into one of the top flight garages in terms of their operation?
Well, the only way you can be a top flight organization, Jack, and you know this as well as anybody, is you got to be in direct connection with the OEM. And that's always been the case, whether it was Holman Moody, Petty Enterprises, TRD and Gibbs, Chevy and Hendrick,
Junior Johnson and Chevrolet and Buick. Yeah.
Right. Like it goes all the way back to the 50s with, the guy with the boat company that was in with Chrysler, right? What was that guy's name? Klossmeyer or something. He owned the 300, the 301,
right,
and the 302. Keycoffer. That's right. Like it goes back to the inception of the sport. So the only possible way, and even so, even if you get to the point where you are a factory-backed team, i.e. Dodge and Ray Abraham, right? The list goes on. Mm-hmm. You could have all the parts and pieces and still not be in contention to win championships every year, because it's that hard on that side of the garage to win consistently. But I think what could benefit Spire and also benefit the sport as a whole would have another manufacturer or two come in, because then that starts to trickle down some of that OEM funds, right? Because let's just throw out some hypotheticals. If a Honda comes in, mm-hmm. right, they got to pick a team with an engine shop to build their motors. So let's just say the RCR is the top of the heap available to build motors and to switch OEMs. So then you can kind of hitch your wagon to RCR as a single car or a double car operation. But until you have the infrastructure to be able to accommodate a OEM, man, NASCAR's trying to get it back to somewhat earth with the spend with this next gen car. But really and truly, if you're not the first with the bucket to the spigot of information from OEM, you're never going to be consistently winning races. And, you can have great partners, and we have great partners now. You always need more. But if you're on the bottom of the OEM totem pole, you're never going to be in the mix consistently to make the playoffs or win championships. And I think that we have all the connections to do so. It's just a matter about seeing how the blueprint of the garage unfolds over the next 16 months.
Does your gut indicate to you that if a new OEM does enter NASCAR, and there's been an awful lot of talk that that's an eventuality, if not one, maybe multiple ones, that Spire is positioning itself and kind of networking in the hopes that, hey, I've seen crazier things. Look at what they did with Bill Davis, that all of a sudden Spire Motorsports may be in the running to be the flagship for a new brand?
I would hope, and I feel like that's a little bit too far down the road to say shoulda, coulda, wouldas. But, I think short term, we are consistently trying to make these Gen 6 cars better to get to the end of the year. We have a little bit of help from Ganassi. We have a decent motor deal from Hendrick, and I think for us, the next 2 spots in points are obtainable. It'd be a hard stretch. There's 3 Stewart Haas cars directly in front of us in points. And those guys are spending over $15 million a car. And you add that all together and it's over $50 million, right? Our budget is somewhere between 9 and 11. And you combine the knowledge internal of those guys versus what we have to work with. And it's a hard road to hoe, but still, if we can block and tackle and stack pennies, we might be able to get there if those guys have some problems. I think that if we just continue to get better incrementally each and every week, or, over the course of 5 race blocks, we can figure out some ways to execute better, and get off on the right foot of the next gen car and be competitive. And that would be, it always goes back to how you are on the racetrack. You can talk, you can hope, you can be in the meetings all you want to, but when the rubber hits the road, you got to perform. And the better you perform, the better those meetings go on the flip side. It doesn't go the other way around. It's like the chicken or the egg. You got to be competitive on the racetrack and show value to OEMs and partners and people, whether it be different pit crew guys that might want to come over. You gotta perform. And that's what we're working toward each and every week. But Cup Series is the deep end of the pool for sure. And you got to figure out how to tread water.
Corey, you bring a very candid realism to your life, and to you've become a media darling. First, there was stacking pennies, and I do want to talk about that. And also, I have a bone to pick with you in regards. But then also your regular appearances on Sirius XM radio, on the NASCAR channel. You absolutely, the phones light up. You have so much fun with that. Is it a great escape from some of the other challenges, and that's the new breed word, that you face week in and week out?
It is, because as much as I think that our broadcast partners do a good job of covering the sport, there's a lot of things they don't get the time and the time block to talk about. Or, and a lot of them, I understand we got Clint and some former drivers in the booth, but if you're not in it that particular day, you don't have necessarily the viewpoint of seeing a race play out the way it did, whether it be tire fall off, or how bad the wind was, or what the temperature was, or how the cars were driving that particular day. So to be able to jump on a Sirius XM radio and people to call in on how they viewed the race, and then me being able to offer my point of view from what actually was happening, or what I think, because I hate the high downforce, low horsepower package, and they took horsepower away from us at Texas. But I also didn't think that was the wrong move. I think that was the correct move for balancing the scale or swinging the scale for the All-Star race more towards the entertainment factor versus the full-blown drive a car that's hard to drive. And when NASCAR has that dial, you should crank that thing up to the entertainment value for the All-Star race when you have the opportunity to. And for example, they took horsepower away for the All-Star race, but the track temperature was 150 degrees. So the difference that the show was going to be with the amount of horsepower was I guess equalized by the track temperature. So if we had a combination of lack of horsepower and at least a manageable track temperature, it could have been a really good race. Unfortunately, the Mother Nature dialed up a hot one for them down there in Texas. And even at the end of the night, when the track was shaded, it still ended up being a pretty cool, pretty decent race. But, little things like that, I can offer my opinion because I am in the trenches. And I love talking about the sport, man. I grew up in it just like you. I don't care about baseball. I don't care about hockey. I don't care about football. I care about racing. I care about the people in racing. I care about the business of it. And to be able to make a couple bucks talking about it throughout the week, it definitely, I'm not going to say I'm going to be a media guy anytime soon, but to be able to have the opportunities with SiriusXM and NASCAR.com with the podcast, I certainly try to take advantage of those because as much as it helps the fans understand the sport better, it helps keep my brand relevant off the racetrack as well.
Well, when you said it's not about a lot of money, being an employee of SiriusXM as well, let's put it this way. Well, let's not reveal, but let's just say that you damn well better do it because you've got a passion for the sport.
Yeah, you do it because you like it.
All right, Stacking Pennies, how'd it come about? And I got to tell you, it is so much fun to listen to because it is Corey Lajoie unplugged and unfiltered.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get my hand slapped sometimes because I forget.
You want to answer that? It may, it could be Hendrick. Yeah.
Lajoie's I have to remember sometimes, or sometimes I forget where I'm doing the podcast, and it's in the basement of either the NASCAR production. So sometimes I probably swing the damn pendulum a little bit too far on the driver's side on what I want to see, or what sometimes NASCAR might not be doing right, in my opinion. And I'm like, oh, shoot, this is a big ass building I'm in, and they're giving me the opportunity and the platform to do it. But they've given me a lot of leeway, and they sometimes they really enjoy my takes on things. So I've learned how to toe the line. I feel like there's some things that could be discussed publicly, and there's some things that need to be talked about privately between the people on NASCAR side and the drivers. So, my best buddy Ryan Flores, who changes front tires for Brad Keselowski, he's our pit road analyst, but now we've been trying to incorporate him more on the show because he looks at racing the same way we do,
right.
On all the elements of the sport. So anytime you can get people in there that have slightly differing opinions, but also see the sport in the, I guess, I don't want to say the correct lens, but the way actually understand how the business works, and to figure out how to explain that to the listeners who see it through only one channel or one channel of the broadcast, whether it be Fox or NBC. So to give those guys a little peek behind the curtain on, the intricacies of the garage is always a blast for me.
Well, as I said, it's a must listen if you're a race fan. All right. There is a quid pro quo, you realize. All right.
Yeah.
That I was the first to reach out. Now you've been on my podcast, and listen, if you reciprocate, the one thing you can count on, I really don't give a damn whether NASCAR slaps my hand or not. I just say what's on my mind based on, as you know, 50 years of experience from everywhere from being a flagman to starting as an announcer, as I shared my story time last week, or right down to spending 35 years at ABC. So I'm expecting the call pretty soon.
All right. So I don't get necessarily to line up my guests as flexible as you get to line up the guests on your show, but we're always looking for good guys for some stories to jump on. We had Jeff Bodine on the week after the Coke 600 because everybody wants to talk to, we had Kyle Larson on a couple of times on the show, but everybody wants to talk about the guy who won 269 for Rick. I want to talk to the guy who won number one for Rick.
Exactly.
So that was a great interview. I always love talking to Jeff, and you guys are friendly as well. So, and we had Ricky Rudd on. He was another all-time favorite. So there's a lot of great things that we've done on the podcast so far, and I continue to look forward to possibly having you on, man. It's
I'll tone it down. All right. I'll tone it down.
You scare me a little bit because they might not slap your hand, but they're going to slap mine after
yours.
You get off.
Hey, it's funny you bring up Jeff Bodine because that's the subject of my story time in this episode, and how Jeff Bodine and the late Don Flynn came together, and one of them received not one fine for fighting, but 2 fines. A little bit later in this podcast, I'll explain. Hey, it's a real pleasure. Give my best to your dad, to your granddad. I say continually to you, I apologize for your pop. Okay.
Yeah.
When God made Randy Lajoie, he broke the mold. Then he proceeded to beat the living crap out of the mold maker.
Yeah. Well, it was that. And it was also like that filter between that little filter that rests right underneath your brain between your mouth. He just left that off.
Yeah.
Some guys have a broken filter. It might be a little bit clogged up. So some stuff passes by. Dad's does not exist. And I love him for it. And he's definitely stuck his foot in his mouth plenty of times, but whatever comes out of Randy Lajoie's mouth is how he feels, right, wrong, or indifferent. So, everybody appreciates that about him. And, and I think that era of drivers, my dad included, and you can lump him into the good old boys, conversation of, that was the pre-social media,
For sure. Yeah.
Sponsor, ambassador, like people wanted to just put their patch on a fire suit because the guy was a badass and he did it his way. Now you're so dependent on partners and you're so dependent on fan support and all the stuff that goes along with being able to do the jobs that we do. You can't say some of that stuff that you're wanting to say, or people don't want the vanilla driver, but a lot of times you do have to tone it down a little bit and be a little more vanilla than you can swirl. But I try to toe the line, and sometimes it bites me, but generally speaking, fans seem to enjoy it, so we'll keep being me.
Well, I hope that you will keep being you, and wish you the best of luck. And I'm going to have your dad on because you talk about his unfiltered side, but he also exercised an obligation he felt to his peers in the total development of seat technology, and how I want to cover with him how he went across America trying to convince people of the importance. And now we know where seat technology is. Hey, Corey, it's been a real pleasure, and continued good success. And I'll be tuning in to Stacking Pennies each and every week.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on, Jack. Talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. Yeah, I'll tell you the Bodine story. So Bodine pissed off virtually everybody when he first showed up at Stafford.
Yeah.
And so they have the traditional drivers meeting, and the big ramp there, where the blacktop is. All the drivers, when you had it, they used to have the drivers meeting right there, and they're congregating. And Fran Grote was the old chief steward, and he goes through everything. Is any questions? Now, Don Flynn was a former semi-pro professional boxer, weighed in at about 210 and about 6'4". He raises his hand and he says, "Yeah, what's the fine for fighting?" Grote goes, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I want to know what the fine for fighting is." So he looks it up, section 25-3.5. Fighting will result in an immediate fine of $100. All of a sudden, here comes Flynn up the hill. He lays $100 bill on Grote, goes back down and cold cocks Bodine.
No.
Yes. Then goes back up the hill, gives another $100 and says, "Just in case I feel the urge to do it again."
Yes.
So
that's amazing.
That's this week's story time. Hey, I appreciate it. Sorry I ran so long, but you're just
I'm sorry I kept rescheduling on you. We just got in the house last week.
You happy with the house?
It doesn't matter if I'm happy with it. My wife's happy.
Yeah, well, you're smart. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, man.
All right, Jack.